Alright, we're going to prepare the loom that we're going to be using in our class to start weaving on it. This was the example that y'all probably saw, and it's a 2-inch, and I used the 2-inch section of this loom to make the smaller one. It is kind of dense, so I think that it's going to be easier to learn the stitches on a more open pattern. So it's going to end up looking, this is not the exact steps I'm going to take, but it's going to be more open like that one because the holes are spread out a little bit more. So we're going to use these outer set of holes to make the 2.5-inch medallion, and this is a 36 hole loom. You could have a loom like this that has 48-inch holes or 48 holes, so you got 48, 48, and then you break it down to 24 and 24, and there's other things that you can do on a loom like that. I think this one might be 32, so you've got a heart shape, you can have leaf shapes, you can have all kinds of things. But we're going to work on this one so that the outer edge is what we're going to be lacing. The inner edge laces a little bit different, so I'm going to probably put that on a separate video because it's just a little bit different. I've cut 45 inches of just any color. It doesn't matter if it matches your project or not. A contrasting color works best, and you also want it in a non-stretching thread like cotton. This is a number 10 crochet cotton. And it's going to be cut away from the loom, so again, it doesn't matter what color it is. So first thing I'm going to do is just poke my needle through one of the holes, and you can use a tapestry needle or anything that'll fit. I do want enough of a tail left over that it's not going to give me trouble trying to tie a knot, because I have to tie a knot at the end, and I hate dealing with little tiny pieces of thread left over. So I just don't want to cover up any of these outside holes. So now that that's secure and I pull on it, it's got to be tight. I'm just going to go around and around the outside edge and pull it tight as you go. You want these tight because our lace pattern is going to be hanging onto these threads. It's going to be pulled tight across here. So if you have some saggy ones and some tight ones, your lace is not going to hang right, or not. It's going to be a little distorted. Just look a whole lot neater if you do your lacing here pretty tight. You still need to be able to get your needle under it, but that's not a big deal once you get everything tied down. So I'm going to continue around till I've made it to the other side, and then I'll show you how you secure it. Alright, I've just pulled my thread through the last hole. So I'm going to turn it over to the back. I can unthread my needle and trim this a little bit so it makes it a little bit easier to tie a knot. Take the tape off, and we're just going to do a really tight, make sure our last few loops are not sagging, and then we're going to just, I like to pass it over and over twice. That helps it to hold on whenever I get it down there, and you don't have to have anybody holding that for you. With this cotton thread, it usually will stay if you go over twice. And then I just make another little simple knot, and then one more, just because there's going to be a lot of pressure on this. And don't trim it too short because you don't want that knot to come out. You can put fray check on there if you're worried about it. So our loom is ready to start spreading the web. Okay, I've threaded my needle with this light purple or lilac, and I've got about 150 inches here. You really shouldn't do that on your first round, so maybe go with a couple of yards, but you are going to run out of thread, and so I probably should cut this short and show you how to tie on a knot when you do run out of thread. But all your knots are going to be on the part that's facing you. When you're working on these lace things, all your knots, all the wrong side is up. So you're always looking at all your knots and all the places where you've had to connect. And all we try to do is place our knots where they are going to be hidden behind a component of the lace, so that when you turn this over, you don't see them because they're hidden behind some of these places that join. So there's no way to get around running out of thread unless you're doing a very small one like this. I have found with this small medallion that I can cut 130 inches of thread, and I have enough to spread my web and stitch all of my design on the inside. So I have no idea on this loom, so I cut 150 inches. So if this starts getting on my nerves, I may have to trim it down and then just bite the bullet and tie on with a knot. So if you do run out of thread, all you have to do is tie a really neat knot where you left off and then continue on. Usually it's best at the beginning of a new round to do that. So I'm going to attempt to spread my complete web without having to stop and rethread. That's not always possible. You can knot on that also. So if my thread starts giving me trouble, then I will stop and do that. So that'll be the next step, is spreading the web. Okay, the first thing we need to do is take our needle and pass it through the back of the loom almost to the end. And I like to leave a good sized tail, because if I'm going to use my long needle, you can use a short needle at the end if you want to, but I don't like to be stingy with this. So 8 to 10 inches probably will be sufficient. Secure that and turn your loom back over. I like to go in at A, but you can start anywhere you want to. But these letters, they're only there to help you stay on track where you are, because I'll reference that when I'm doing my stitches. So make sure that tape is holding tight, because you want all of these to be tight. So I'm going to always be moving clockwise around the loom when I'm doing this part. And I want to poke my needle in, pointing toward clockwise. I'm going in at the letter A, just under that loop. And so I like to just right away take my left hand and smooth out anything that's going on with this thread, because I'm trying to be lazy and work with this long thread, and so it may cause me some trouble. And the farther along we get, the more twist is going to be going on, and we're going to be twisting this yarn quite a bit. So sometimes you'll need to dangle your needle upside down and get some of that out of there. But just take your time with this, and make sure when you poke your needle in that you don't pierce that thread right there. So I'm just going to take this slow, pull with my right hand, smooth out with my left, and just keep pulling. And it goes faster as you start using up some of this thread. And you want to pay attention to where that cut tail is. And it's coming up right here. You want to make sure it always passes through, because eventually it's going to catch up to where you're stitching, and you're going to need to pull it up higher on the thread. And here's what I do. First thing you want to do is pop that down into the hole tight. And if my tail starts catching up to me, I'll just kind of move it up the line, and then I'll smooth out the rest of this stuff, because it's more than an arm's length for me right now. So alright, so I've gone in at A. I'm going to come straight down to C, and again I'm going to poke my needle in going clockwise. My needle is pointing toward the next minute on the clock. And right now I've got it laying flat, but I don't normally do that. So again, we want to pull that, pop that down to the base of that little hole right there, and then now we're going to go up across the loom, but we're going to go clockwise to the next available holding stitch. So eventually all of our little holding stitches are going to have 2 strands. So they're going to start and stop at the middle, and then this other one is going to have the 2 strands. Alright, so they're always crossing in the middle. So I'm going to do this one. I'm going to poke, I'm going to hold this up like I do. Poke it into the next available empty to the clockwise side of the last one. And I'm going to pull slowly with my right, straighten out this mess with my left, and just keep going. I usually don't even look at the loom at this point because I'm more worried about that thread knotting up on me and getting all twisty. So I'm going to pull that down tight, cross the loom, and then the next one clockwise from the one next to it, or the last one we did. So I'll poke my needle in going clockwise, but then I want to turn this to make it easier for me to manage all this thread. So I'm going to keep turning my loom. And again, I'm really not looking at the loom at this point. I'm just managing thread. Pull it down tight, cross the loom, go over to the next clockwise empty spot. And you can kind of feel if you're piercing that thread, like this one wants to pierce pretty badly. That's why you need a pretty blunt needle. So I've turned my loom to make it easier for me, and I'm going to continue on this way, always crossing in the middle and going to the next clockwise empty holding thread. So when I get close to the end of lacing all or running, or what we call spreading the web, right now we're like a spider, we're building our web that's going to be our blank canvas for stitching on. So once I've made it to the other side without any catastrophes, I'll come back. And if I do have to stop and cut my thread, I will come back and show you how to fasten back on. So if I happen to have broke my thread at this point right here, what I would do is I would remember which direction I was fixing to go, like I was fixing to go in that one. And I would know that's the next one I need to do. So I'm going to say, okay, that's between C and D, so I know it's this next one past C. And I would go ahead and tie a neat little knot right on top here. You don't want to go underneath because, again, the right side of your work is going to be against the loom and you're looking at the back side. So if you passed your needle under there, it's going to show on the good side of your lace. So try to make a little neat knot right at the top, and then when you tie back on, you do the same thing and you continue where you left off. I want to show one where I accidentally split that thread. I tried to pull my yarn down, or my thread down, and I noticed it wouldn't move. So I'm going to have to unthread my needle and pull that out of that where I split it, because if I tried to pass my needle back through, it's just going to cause a mess. You may get caught up in there, and then it'll end up breaking that thread and weakening that thread. So I'm going to unthread my needle and pull this back out and try again. Alright, I'm going through the last one, and I am done with my web. So every one of these holding stitches needs to have a double strand. So it's easy for us to forget that these are actually 2 separate strands, and sometimes we just want to count it as one. So you can go along and just straighten out any of the twist so that they're all lying flat. They're going to keep doing what they want to do, but once we start getting some weaving on here, everything's going to start straightening out. So just do the best you can, and I'll show you what to do with this as we get started on the first round of our design.